Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm Erica Meltzer, Bureau Chief at Chalkbeat Colorado. Before we go too much further, I want to ask Indira Guzman to, she's going to be translating for us tonight, and thank you to the Colorado Trust for supporting translation for this event. I'm going to ask her to walk us through the translation so everyone can follow along, and then we'll get started.
Thank you very much. Good evening, buenas noches. My name is Indira Guzman, and I'm here with the Community Language Co-op. This evening, the organizers of this event have made a commitment to language justice. What that means is that we want everyone to engage and participate in the language of their heart. So for this, we're going to utilize simultaneous interpretation. In a second, when we turn on the interpretation feature, you will see an icon on the bottom of the screen. Please select the icon and select the language that you prefer to engage in. If you are not fully bilingual, please select the language so that you can hear the interpretation if they are speaking in a language that you don't speak. We'll be interpreting into Spanish and English this evening. I will repeat this now in español for our Spanish-speaking friends. Buenas noches, mi nombre es Indira Guzmán y estoy aquí con la Community Language Co-op. Esta noche los organizadores de este evento han hecho un compromiso a la justicia del lenguaje. Lo que eso significa es que queremos que todos participen en el idioma de su corazón y vamos a hacer esto por medio de la interpretación simultánea. En un segundo, cuando prendamos la interpretación, usted va a ver un icono en la parte de abajo de la pantalla. Por favor, seleccione ese icono y elija el idioma en el que prefiere participar. Tendremos interpretación de inglés a español o español al inglés. Si no es bilingüe, le pedimos que por favor seleccione un idioma para que pueda escuchar el idioma o puede ser que no entiende. Entonces, si trae un celular o una tablet, por favor seleccione los 3 botoncitos y ahí encontrará los ajustes de interpretación. If you're on a cell phone or a tablet, please look for the 3 dots or the more option and you will find the interpretation settings there. We're going to go ahead and turn on interpretation, and I'll do a quick sound check just to make sure everyone can hear me. I'll start in English. Just give me a second until the interpretation icon comes on.
Thumbs up.
Erica, we're ready for you.
Thank you so much. Again, I'm Erica Meltzer. I'm the Bureau Chief for Chalkbeat Colorado. For those of you who are not familiar, we are a nonprofit news organization dedicated to telling the story of education in America. And we have a particular focus on the students who are not well served by the system that we have today. Over the last couple of years, we have increasingly focused our coverage on the issue of reading instruction. This is one of the most fundamental building blocks of education. This is the tool that allows students to access education for the rest of their lives. And in Colorado, only about 40% of children read on grade level. And educators find that children who do not read well at the end of 3rd grade will often increasingly struggle through the rest of their academic career. When we started meeting with Montbello Power Advocates, we heard from parents there that they're also very concerned about reading instruction and how well their children are or are not learning to read and what the implications of that are for their academic careers and for the opportunities that are available to them. So tonight we're going to be hearing from a wonderful panel about some of the challenges around reading instruction and how we can improve literacy for children in Montbello and across Denver public schools. Before we go further, a few notes. Thank you to Montbello Power Advocates and the Colorado Trust for their support for this event. This event is being recorded. It will be made available to everyone who registered. The chat box is open as a place for community dialogue, and we just ask that any comment you make there be appropriate and respectful. There's a Q&A box on the lower right-hand corner of your Zoom screen, and that's open for questions that you have for our panel. And we'll try and ask as many audience questions as we can, and some folks may answer questions in writing as well. Please note the interpretation box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can select English or Spanish, depending on which language you want to hear, to ensure you can hear from all of our panelists. And we'll also be tweeting this event. If you want to tweet with us, it's #COLiteracy. And before we go further, I'm just going to ask Blanca Maria Madrid from Montbello Power Advocates to say a few words.
Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Blanca Madrid. Yo soy cofundadora de un programa de educación temprana que se llama La Piñata del Aprendizaje. En este programa servimos a familias que tienen niños de 0 a 5 años alrededor del área metropolitana de Denver, incluyendo Montbello. He vivido aquí en Montbello por más de 10 años. Me apasiona el trabajo comunitario. Creo que crear soluciones para las necesidades de nuestro vecindario es muy importante. Es por eso que estoy aquí, orgullosamente del equipo de MPA. ¿Y quiénes somos MPA? Pues somos inmigrantes o somos hijos de inmigrantes, como la gran parte de Estados Unidos. Somos muchas culturas unidas, una comunidad diversa y resiliente. Somos extremadamente locales, pero también somos muy internacionales. Somos simples soñadores que venimos a construir un futuro para nuestras familias. Somos padres, alumnos, maestros y organizadores. Somos un grupo que luchamos contra el racismo, la violencia, la ignorancia, las pandillas y sobre todo somos un grupo que promovemos la equidad. Me encantaría presentarles a cada uno de mis compañeros y que se presentaran individualmente. Gracias Didi, Paul, Chuck y sobre todo una de nuestras panelistas que está aquí el día de hoy, Priscila Ramirez. Gracias.
Hi, my name is Ann Schimke. I'm a reporter here at Chalkbeat. I'm going to be moderating the panel tonight. I would like to run through our awesome panel and introduce everybody. We have Priscila Ramirez. She is a Montbello parent of 3 children and a community activist. We also have Kelly Okoye. She is a longtime educator in Montbello. She also grew up in the area. Dr. Holly Baker Hill. She is a dyslexia and literacy specialist for Denver Public Schools. Also Meredith Stolte. She is director of humanities for Denver Public Schools. And finally, we have Dr. Sonia Cabell. She is associate professor of reading education at the Florida Center for Reading Research at Florida State University. I'm gonna jump right into questions. First of all, Priscila, I'd like to start with you. As a parent, can you tell us a little bit about your son's experience with learning to read? What went right and what didn't go well?
Hola, buenas noches, Sam. Buenas noches a todos y gracias por estar aquí con nosotros esta noche. Específicamente hacia la educación de mi hijo, ha sido un camino muy difícil de lidiar hasta el momento, porque desde que comenzamos identificando que él tenía un problema de comunicación, no hablaba lo que otros niños de su edad hablaban, no tenía esa fluencia de lenguaje. Entonces, esto nos llevó a un camino desconocido totalmente porque no hubo alguien que nos guiara para saber qué era la educación especial. De las cosas que han trabajado bien es que gracias al sistema, desde el principio de sus años escolares, él comenzó a tener intervención sobre terapia de lenguaje. Lamentablemente, después de bastantes años y diferentes escuelas, vimos que él no estaba aprendiendo. No estaba aprendiendo porque el sistema o el currículum que se sigue en la mayoría de las escuelas no es funcional para niños con dislexia. Nosotros encontramos que el año pasado fue diagnosticado con dislexia porque después de años y años de estar batallando con que no aprendía, con que iba retrasado, que no estaba a nivel de grado, que no estaba leyendo al nivel de grado, tuve la decisión de empezar a investigar más y buscar qué opciones tenía mi hijo, no solamente las que me estaba ofreciendo la escuela. A través de eso, llegamos a que él fuera evaluado por parte de Children's Hospital y ahí fue donde nos dimos cuenta que él tiene la condición de dislexia. Obviamente el currículum que se enseña en las escuelas regulares, que está basado en la educación, la alfabetización balanceada, no funciona para un cerebro disléxico. Entonces, lo que hemos hecho desde entonces, pudimos conseguir una persona, un terapeuta que viene y da terapias a casa y él tiene el soporte de la escuela en cuanto a terapia de lenguaje. Hasta ahorita ha funcionado, pero lamentablemente en las escuelas públicas de Denver y en las escuelas autónomas como las charter no se da una terapia específica o no tenemos la equidad de que se le dé la educación necesaria a cada niño. Se practica la igualdad para todos, sí se les da el servicio, pero no reciben equitativamente los servicios que realmente necesitan. Entonces, como padre, para mí ha sido una de las preocupaciones más grandes, porque sé que mi hijo no es el único que sufre de necesidades especiales que no están siendo llenadas por parte de la escuela. Creo que funcionalmente hemos aprendido mucho y bajo la experiencia hemos podido guiar a otros papás, pero lamentablemente sé que él ya está en un nivel de grado que ya al siguiente va a tener que leer para aprender y él todavía sigue en la desventaja de que todavía no lee a nivel de grado. Y es preocupante para mí como padre porque sé que bajo estadísticas, la mayoría de los sistemas de prisión se basan en los niveles de lectura que tienen los niños de segundo y tercero grado. Entonces, pensando a futuro, yo quiero ver a mi hijo realizado y practicando lo que le gusta hacer con una buena educación. No quisiera visualizar a mi hijo en un problema que se vea envuelto en un sistema carcelario solamente por no haber tenido el apoyo para poder aprender a leer.
Thank you, Priscilla. Thank you for sharing. We appreciate that. I wanted to jump to Dr. Hill. Dr. Hill, you're a dyslexia specialist, and I'm curious, if students aren't reading well in the early grades, how do parents or educators tell if they truly have a disability or if they're not getting the right kind of reading instruction?
That's a great question, Ann. And thank you, Ms. Ramirez, for sharing your story, because I think every child has a story, every family does. I think it's very important that we're thinking in these terms of equity and thinking about each child. And so when I think about, well, first I want to frame where I am in Denver Public Schools. So I lie within the special education department. So I'm already in the special education department. So what happens in the general education classroom setting is not something that I can control. So what I control is what happens within special education after a student has been identified as having a disability. And so, but I will say, and answer your question is a really good one. I would really encourage families, and Meredith, you may want to speak to this also, but I would really encourage families to, if they think that that their child is having difficulty learning to read, right? Some of those early signs that we look for is like early rhyming, right? Speech language, right? Oral language. So I think you really have to have a good working relationship with your child's teacher and state that I am worried, I am concerned. This is what I see at home. What are you seeing in the classroom? So there is the International Dyslexia Association has a wonderful fact sheets about dyslexia that gives specific characteristics that you can look for. And I know, Caroline, if you could put that in the chat, I would appreciate it. I hope that helps, Ann.
Yes, that is helpful. And I just want to piggyback before we move on to another panelist. I have a very similar question for English language learners. How does the district account for the fact that reading struggles might be because of learning a new language at the same time as learning to read? And maybe not also, again, a disability.
I think Meredith will have to take that because that's really a general education question.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Meredith, we can hop to you.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. I think that there are multiple components that fit into this. And so I'm going to maybe answer through a few different routes. I think first and foremost, we have done a ton of learning as a district, and that means us in central office and us as teachers around what the science of reading actually means and what it takes and what the components are that a child needs to experience to become a reader. And that's any child. That's a child that is a language learner. That's a child that may have a disability, and that is a general education child. And so by better understanding how we acquire language, we are able to better meet the needs of our students. And so that then sets teachers up to provide the experiences through pedagogy and instruction, but also to know what to look for and listen for as it connects to the science and how children acquire language. And so I know that might not be a direct answer to your question around multi-language learners, but there is a science that we are learning. And as we dig more into that and better understand how children acquire language, we're better able to meet the needs of all students in the general education setting, so that, to Holly's point, we're able to address the needs of students through classroom instruction and maybe through intervention before we are labeling a child as needing a special service through special education.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Cabell, I'm going to move to you next. I was hoping you could tell our audience more about what knowledge building content is and why it's important in early reading instruction. I think it could be a new term for a lot of people, and I think maybe we could just kind of set out some definitions and talk about why it's important and what it would even look like.
Sure, thank you. In talking about knowledge building, we're not minimizing the importance of decoding and reading words with fluency. But there's this another piece of the puzzle where language comprehension is extremely important. And part of that is not only the language that underlies, but also the knowledge that children have. And it's knowledge about the world, both the social and natural world. So science and social studies knowledge. And for a while now, science and social studies has often been pushed aside, and reading has kind of taken, over. And starting in the early 2000s, the block for reading became very long. And so in many districts in the early grades, science and social studies is given a short shrift. Not because teachers and schools don't want science and social studies instruction, but because of that larger reading block. So what some curriculum publishers and school districts are trying to do is trying to integrate science and social studies and English language arts more, so that students can have both of them. And research does show that integrating those could be more powerful than teaching them siloed and separate.
Just a quick addendum to that question. What would a parent look for or ask about to figure out if their school's curriculum does include knowledge building?
I would recommend that parents ask about the science and social studies instruction. What does that look like? What are children learning? How do they learn it? Do they learn it in systematic, incremental ways? Or is it that the topics jump around based on some English language arts curricula, for example? Sometimes schools will use whatever the topic is for that English language arts curriculum, but that curriculum might not be what I call a content-rich English language arts curriculum. Many of the, for example, Wonders is an example of this. Many of the kind of core basal series like Wonders, Reading Street, Journeys, don't necessarily have this systematic content building approach, although they embed science and social studies topics. So it's important to know the ways in which the school is actually building children's science and social studies knowledge. And that could be in the science and social studies time, or in the English language arts time, or a combination of both.
Thank you. Kelly, I'd like to move to you. So you taught second grade, I believe, for 8 years in Montbello, at a Montbello school. Can you talk about how your students were reading when they came to you and what your experience was like preparing them for the next grade?
It was a very challenging experience teaching literacy, primarily because I wasn't teaching now. There's been huge shifts with the science of reading and implementing more structured literacy in the classroom. And I think that's going to make a huge difference. So there were a lot of gaps in phonics, in decoding and word recognition, but an intense amount of pressure to get students to access grade level content. And you can't without those foundational aspects. And so this shift is very welcome, a little late for me. I have since moved to teaching visual arts and I'm no longer teaching literacy. So I'm not in the classroom right now, day to day with folks who are actually implementing evidence-based practices now, which is a beautiful thing. But for me personally, it was just very, very difficult to help students, to move students and, to catch them up without the direct instruction in phonemic awareness and phonics. So, yeah.
Thank you. That's helpful. And were you able to fill gaps by the end of the year you were with the students, or did that feel impossible to you?
I was able to help students make significant growth, but it never was adequate. I never feel like it was good enough. If it's not happening for every student, I'm never going to feel like successful. It's just, the world of being an educator and the pressure that's put on us and that we put on ourselves. So it was very frustrating to not be able to move every student. So when they walked into third grade, they could access the content and be prepared to demonstrate their knowledge in a very, very narrow scope of PARC CMAS.
Sure. Thank you. Meredith, I wanted to hop over to you again. I know we got you the first time around, but the reading curriculum that's used in a lot of Denver schools right now, and I think this is true for a lot of schools in Montbello, is Benchmark Advance or Benchmark Adelante, which is the Spanish language version of Benchmark Advance. The state evaluated those two programs and found that they didn't meet its standards because they're not scientifically based. I was wondering if you could tell us whether the district is planning to switch to a state-approved curriculum for kindergarten through third grade.
And I'm so excited you asked this question because yes is the answer. And we've been starting to see some of the we have some schools piloting a curriculum this year that is on CDE's approved list for both English and it will be for Spanish. And to see the difference in the experience for kids that are in classrooms. And I think to Sonia's point, that address the foundational pieces of reading, but are also building the world knowledge through the knowledge block has been wonderful. I think it's really highlighting for the classrooms where this curriculum is being piloted, like what the difference is and how when children engage in the like explicit and systematic way of learning to read, that like the light in them is completely different because they can engage and they can understand, and it's not like a guessing game, which to be honest is some of what exists in older curricula like Benchmark. So to directly answer your question, yes, we will be moving to adopt a CDE approved curriculum in the coming year across the district.
Awesome, thank you. And would you mind sharing with our audience what the pilot curriculum that is being used in some schools is?
I can share the pilot. Yes, we have been working with Core Knowledge Language Arts, so CKLA, and the Spanish companion is Caminos.
Okay, great. And one thing to note about that, and I think Dr. Cabell would probably agree with this, is I think that is known for being a knowledge building reading curriculum. So that's probably worth it for our audience to know as well.
And can I speak to that for a moment, Ann?
Absolutely.
So I conducted 2 randomized control trials on core knowledge language arts. So there's a few of these curricula in the United States that are content rich, that are being widely used, content rich English language arts curricula in the kindergarten through 2nd grade space. These are curricula like core knowledge language arts, wit and wisdom, EL, and ARC core. Those are 4 of among the very most widely used knowledge rich curricula. The ones that have some evidence that they work in terms of having a randomized control trial are core knowledge language arts, and we had very positive results in the kindergarten trial that we ran, and as well as ARC core just also came out with positive results in their kindergarten trial. So I just wanted to add that. I'm not a developer of the curriculum. I'm just an external evaluator.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Let's see. Priscila, I wanted to move back to you. Given the experience that you had with your son seeking an outside evaluation from Children's Hospital and eventually getting that dyslexia diagnosis, what advice do you have for other parents who might be worried about their own children maybe having a reading disability, or at the very least just struggling in learning to read?
Mi único consejo sería, ustedes conocen más a sus hijos que cualquier otra persona. Culturalmente estamos acostumbrados a que los profesores o los maestros tienen más conocimiento que nosotros académicamente. Pero como padres los conocemos y sabemos más sobre ellos. Si tenemos esa duda de que algo no está bien con los niños, y si vamos a la escuela y por lo regular te dicen, oh, todo está bien, él se va a poner al corriente, todo va a mejorar, yo digo que esa es una mala seña. Porque si un niño ya va atrasado, va a ser muy difícil que para el siguiente año se nivele. Entonces, mi único consejo es, busquen por sí mismos. Busquen por sí mismos, traten de buscar todos los recursos que haya disponibles. Si por la barrera del idioma se les dificulta, busquen a alguien, ya sea en la escuela, una maestra, un vecino, alguien que se dedique a hacer trabajo comunitario, porque lamentablemente en el distrito no tenemos advocates que puedan ayudar. Tristemente es casi, yo creo que uno de los distritos que no cuentan con personas que se dedican a abogar por las necesidades especiales de los niños. Entonces, si no hay alguien que lo haga, hagámoslo por sí mismos. Como padres vamos a ser los mejores abogados de nuestros hijos. No dejemos que alguien más venga y haga nuestro trabajo.
Thank you, Priscilla. Dr. Hill, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the dyslexia screening pilot program that Denver is doing and where that is right now.
That's a great question, Anne. Right before the pandemic hit, I was tasked and asked by Robert Frankton Allen, the former special education director, to start with an internal and external working group within DPS to look at implementing a pilot, right, a screener pilot. So from the information that I have currently, I think Meredith would be better to speak to that, given the fact that the special education department can't head that up. It has to come from the general education teacher end of it. But I will tell you that the internal and external working groups, what we found was that, yes, just like Priscilla said, we definitely do need to be able to empower our teachers, right, with the knowledge of the science of reading and to better understand what dyslexia is and isn't. And so the work that I do in the district is specifically training teachers around dyslexia, around what dyslexia is and isn't, and exactly the type of intervention that those students who are identified, right, with having characteristics of dyslexia, what they do need, and making sure our teachers in special education are highly trained and ready to go. So that's what we've been working on in special education. So I'll be excited to hear what Meredith has to report regarding like the dyslexia screener pilot.
Awesome. And Meredith, I'd like to jump to you in just one moment. Dr. Hill, do all kindergarten through third grade teachers get that training on what dyslexia looks like and what it doesn't look like?
Great question. When we take a look at the READ Act plan and when we look at the 45 hours of very specific content specific areas, right, that now teachers are required to take, there is a very small portion of it, right, that speaks about dyslexia. But I will tell you, CDE is now currently really looking at having some sort of training, right, that all teachers will take regarding dyslexia and going further and deeper into the area of dyslexia. So, which I think is very exciting for the whole state of Colorado. And so, and again, that's coming out of like the dyslexia working group, right, that is in the Colorado Department of Education. So I think we're just on the cusp, and I'm really excited. Like we're just right there. And so, and I think we're going to be pushing that out statewide. And I've seen that happen at other states, and it's just a watershed moment. So it's really exciting.
Got it. So Denver teachers will get this training on dyslexia, but they haven't gotten it yet.
They have the full training, Anne. I think they've gotten a little bit of it through the 45 hours of mandated science of reading, right? Training that everyone's had to take from K to 3. But I think we're going to see a bigger push in the state, right? Where we're going to really look at training teachers in depth further. And it is my personal hope that we see this all the way from K to 12 or even pre-K. Because we know when we talk about dyslexia, we can screen early on. We can screen in ECE actually, even in when a student is 4 years old, 5 years old, 6 years old. So that's exciting, right? So I'm looking forward to really seeing the state move in that direction. I'm serving on committees within CDE and really excited and excited to maybe see our ECE teachers also get trained.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Meredith, now I'm wondering if you can answer the question about the dyslexia pilot program and maybe also address whether there are any Montbello schools that will participate.
Okay, so I don't know the answer to the second part yet. This fall semester, we have been dedicating time to identify schools to pilot that are all over the city so that we make sure we're reaching kind of schools everywhere. And they will then be implementing and like moving forward with the screener in the spring semester.
Okay, great. So coming soon. Kelly, I wanted to hop back over to you. When you were a teacher teaching reading, what resources did you have to help struggling readers, and what would have made your job easier?
Well, there were resources in-house with interventionists and trainings and professional development around literacy. What would have made my job easier would have been just vertical alignment and direct instruction that was aligned with the science of reading from ECE. So those foundational skills, if students came to me with, the basics and word recognition by second grade. And that would have made it easier. And also interventions that were aligned with the science of reading. We were doing a lot of guided reading, and I'll try to be brief because this is my jam, this whole topic. But we really are focused on guided reading, and guided reading has, in my opinion, gotten a bad rap. But I think the majority of the reason is because we were using it for intervention. So we were giving guided reading intervention to students who had skill deficits in phonemic awareness and phonics. And then the guided reading we were giving had this little 5-minute, what we used to call word period, when they needed that entire intervention. So I think that tweak right there would have made a huge difference, not using guided reading as an intervention and direct instruction in word recognition.
Okay, and for our audience who may not know, what is guided reading?
Well, the way it's leveled reading, and you group students according to their level, but you do a level above so that you're able to see their strategy use. It's a way to apply the phonics and the decoding and the word recognition and the comprehension to kind of see how that's going, to see them apply it with an actual book instead of like a drill or a station. But you level the students, and you are supposed to take like running records to inform your instruction for the next session with them, to see how they're reading, how they're decoding, how they're comprehending. And you try to do, in my opinion, a whole lot in a very short amount of time. So you kind of sort of do a lot of things in 30 minutes in practice, but in theory, it's more complicated. But that was my experience. You try to do a whole lot of teaching reading in 30 minutes to students who are grouped the same, homogeneously. So yeah.
Got it.
But y'all can weigh in on that.
No, thank you. And the problem was that some of your students, what they really needed was more focus on those foundational skills like phonics or phonemic awareness, but they were getting almost like this much broader.
Yes, it was broad and it wasn't defined. It was a lot of like tricks instead of just, this is how the English language works. These are the sounds associated with these letters. So for struggling readers, it doesn't work. For students who are close to grade level and you want to see how they're reading and decoding and have comprehension conversations with them and have that interaction for oral language skills, to me, it could be beneficial, but for struggling readers, no.
Okay, great. Thank you for helping our audience understand that a little bit better. That's very helpful. Let's see. Dr. Cabell, I was wondering if you could address some of the other things parents should be looking for when it comes to reading instruction in early elementary grades. We talked about knowledge building curriculum. What else should they be looking for?
Yeah, in addition to definitely the things that Dr. Hill was talking about in terms of their attention to the sound structure of language, what we call phonological awareness. Can they, play those silly sound games with you, where they know the beginning sound of something, or change up that beginning sound? Can they do that sort of thing, or is that difficult for them? you also want to think about their language comprehension, their understanding of language. As can they follow directions, two-step directions? Do they understand what you're saying? When you read a book aloud to them and you talk to them about it, are they understanding what is going on? So you want to be thinking about both their ability to, what underlies print and decoding, but you also want to be thinking about what underlies language comprehension, that comprehension piece. But also one of the pieces I think that's often left out is kids are really interested in writing. They're interested when they see you write. They're interested to explore themselves with writing. And I would encourage that because early on in the process, writing and reading are almost two sides of the same coin. And as children are learning, they're really interested in their things like their name. And, you can teach them a lot from, that's really early on in pre-K, but you can teach them a lot from the things that they're interested in, what they're excited about writing about. Right now, my son is writing books about Minecraft. So it's very exciting for me to see it all unfold. And then I'm able to help him move forward in his spelling development, which helps his decoding skills. As I see how he's doing, I'm not correcting everything he's writing, but I take it as a opportunity to first talk about, we talk about what he's trying to say, the meaning, but then I think, oh, is there something that he's repeating again and again, something that, I want to teach him about, and I take the opportunity to help him grow in his decoding and spelling at the same time.
Great, thank you. And just a quick addendum to that. Are there things parents should be asking their schools about those very topics that you just addressed, or their child's teacher or principal?
Absolutely. I think that parents, parents have the right to know what their children are being taught. And it's particularly right now when, you've heard everybody on the panel talk about how some children are being left behind in the United States, and that's not equitable. So really understanding whether that direct instruction and systematic kinds of instruction is going on is important to know. And I think parents you are the advocate for your child. Nobody else is going to advocate for your child like you are, right? So you are the one to stand up for them, whether they're struggling or whether they're doing really well and need to be challenged further. I think you are the advocate. So I would encourage parents to talk to principals and teachers and really understand. And the teachers and principals should be able to explain this to parents in a way that they understand.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I wanted to pivot now to questions from our audience members. We've got a lot of good ones. And I think what I'm going to do is ask the question and then kind of spotlight one or two people on our panel who might be best situated to answer it. So I think, first of all, for either Meredith or Dr. Hill, Carol is asking, how are all teachers in all grades being trained to be reading teachers? And what is being done for secondary students who struggle with reading?
Okay, this is such a good question. Holly, I'll start and then feel free to jump in. We are starting with K-3 teachers and making sure that in the early grades, our teachers are trained, understanding foundational skills and what it takes to teach a child to read. We are beginning to think about what it looks like at the secondary level. This is a place where we don't have all of the answers. I will say one of the things that is coming, because we do recognize that there are children that are matriculating into middle school and even high school that don't have all of the foundational pieces that give them access to the rich things that they deserve to be reading in those grades. We are working with David Lieben and members of Student Achievement Partners to think about what that training should look like and how we can embed it in a way that's not like the intervention class that moves kids down the hallway for a period, but is embedded in instruction in a way that like honors children in their classroom, but also gives the teachers the skills to help them be strong readers at the grade level. So it's a place where we recognize we have room to grow. And while we're really building the strong foundation K-3, we're starting to think about what does that look like at secondary.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next question is from Christina, possibly for Dr. Cabell. What can or should parents do if the improved curriculum in their child's school won't be implemented until after they're past the K through grade 3 span?
So I took this question came earlier, and I took it to mean that it was in context of that knowledge building, that knowledge-rich integrated curriculum. So I'm going to answer it in that fashion. There are resources available online to, for example, Core Knowledge Language Arts through the Core Knowledge Foundation has a version of their curriculum freely available, and it's all read alouds. So it's driven by read alouds. It's called a knowledge strand. So parents can use them as read alouds for their children. In addition, you don't need necessarily the curriculum your school is using to teach children about science and social studies topics. What I would encourage you to do is to check out books that are related to one another. And we think about these as a text set, and perhaps teachers can kind of guide what are some good text sets, or what books would you recommend that I read aloud to my child to learn about whichever topics. And remember that this should all be motivating for your child. So I focus on topics that my child is really excited about, interested in, and then let's delve deeper into that topic, because then my child will then be motivated to read other things and to learn about the world in other ways. Where if it feels like it's just something we are doing and like because it's more school, then the motivation might get lost. So I would encourage it to be something that's they're curious about and they're motivated.
Great, thank you. This next question is from Emily, I think for Meredith. Why did the curriculum switch in DPS need to come from the state instead of the city or the district identifying the gap ourselves?
Okay, great question. I think we are in a place where many schools are nationally. So it's not just about the state, it's that we are on a journey and we're learning much more about the science of reading and what it takes to give high quality instruction that's really grounded in the 5 components of a strong foundational skills block. And yes, the state has motivated that and made it possible for us to make that shift. But we're like, we're on a journey where the whole nation is to recognize that many of the resources that we've been putting in front of children and how like the knowledge that teachers have has got to shift, or if we're going to address many of the gaps that are created in the way that we currently teach reading. And so we're moving with the nation on how we're acquiring knowledge to best meet the needs of our students.
Thank you.
And would you mind if I followed up on an earlier question that you had regarding dyslexia education for teachers?
Sure.
One thing I did want to mention is that in Denver Public Schools, we have a course up on our platform, which is Schoology, called Looking Through the Lens of Dyslexia. And any teacher, any staff member, anyone in DPS can take that course. And it takes a deeper dive into what dyslexia is. It's I put it together actually during COVID. And we have fantastic videos, tons of information and resources in that course. And it is open to every single staff member in DPS. And so, which I think is exciting, as well as the fact that we have a course on structured literacy called Structured Literacy for Special Education Teachers, but that course has been open to all teachers. And that's a 3-hour course and takes a deep dive into structured literacy and what it is and what it isn't. And so I did want to mention that because we do have resources that have been built out already. And we also have a graduate program with the University of Northern Colorado, where teachers can earn graduate credit for 2 courses that could take a very intensive look at root cause analysis, assessment, gets deeper into dyslexia, gets deeper into structured literacy. So we're definitely, I think, in DPS moving in that right direction, like Meredith said, and we have built out, especially in the special education department, we have built out a lot of really good, strong courses. So I just wanted to mention that we do have that for all staff members in the district.
Thank you. That's helpful. Do you know how many teachers have taken those courses?
I think we have over 200 that have taken the special education structured literacy course. And we have at least, I think we're getting close to 100 of the teachers who've taken the one on dyslexia. So I think, you know, we've got a good cadre already, which is exciting. So I think we're building on that, just like Meredith said, you know, we're building, right? And within the special education department, we're very focused, right, on intervention curriculum. And so an intervention. And so we want to make sure our teachers are trained. So we do have those offerings. I do have a full graduate level course already. I think I have 32 teachers already signed up for course 1, which will start again in January. So those have been hot items, to say the least. So which is great. So getting more information out there, you know, and teachers really engaging, and it's a practicum level course too. So you're interacting with your student as you're going through the course, which is great. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So our next question is from John. It's I think for Kelly and Priscilla. What is being done for students coming from situations where they do not have family members who can advocate for their needs?
Go ahead, Kelly.
Well,
Okay.
I just paused because I was thinking of you and my first interaction with your organization, and thank God for you.
Thank you.
Yes.
No creo que se ha hecho nada. Lamentablemente con la pandemia, esto vino a agudizar el problema que ya existía. Personalmente, con padres que estuvieron cerca de mí, pude darle cierta dirección a dónde o qué podían hacer. Pero los niños que no tienen la oportunidad o no tienen la facilidad de que, no por falta de interés, pero a lo mejor porque sus papás no saben cómo hacerlo, no tienen ninguna posibilidad. No tienen ninguna ayuda. Siguen yendo y pasando de año teniendo el mismo problema y agudizándose todavía más. Lamentablemente es una de las situaciones que se vive en Montbello. Como lo dije antes, no tenemos un sistema de abogacía regularizado para que el niño tenga o no tenga un familiar que abogue por él, haya alguien que lo haga. Pero a lo mejor no es porque la familia no quiera, sino porque no sabe cómo hacerlo. Porque es un camino muy difícil para todas las familias. No hay una guía. Desde el momento en que tú te empiezas a dar cuenta que hay problemas en el desarrollo lingüístico de tu hijo, de aprendizaje, no hay una guía que te diga, después de tal paso y tal paso, sigue tal paso. No hay de parte del distrito, no hay de parte de los maestros, te avientan al ruedo. Entonces, tristemente, fue una de las cosas que nos dimos cuenta que está pasando aquí en Montbello, que se agudizó más con la pandemia, y es algo que queremos que se reconozca para que al reconocerlo se haga un cambio. Ya no podemos pasar con la venda en los ojos de decir, no está pasando porque no sabemos. Ahora ya sabemos que existe. Ahora, sin importar si el niño tenga o no tenga representación familiar, creo que sería muy importante que se le diera la ayuda necesaria.
Kelly, do you want to add anything onto that?
Yes, I was going to add that I think these conversations, are really a good start. There's so much more that we could talk about around advocating and in the school, outside of the school, in the community. But I think it starts with conversations like this and pulling our resources together with district and educators and parents and families so that we can advocate for each other. We can advocate for all students. I think as an educator, it is my job to advocate for every student, whether they are in my classroom, whether I see them in the hallway, whether I taught them when they're in second grade and they are 13 now. It's my job as an educator. I say often, I'm educator, I'm activist, I'm educator. They are one and the same. And if you teach in marginalized communities, then you have to advocate for all students. I can't replace their parents, but I can speak for them whenever possible, and I do very much so to many people's probably nerves. But I think it's our job as educators to speak, to represent and to speak for families when they aren't there. Particularly, I feel just a added responsibility because Montbello is my neighborhood. So that's why I became a teacher to teach in Montbello. But I think, and teachers do that. Teachers in my school do advocate for students on a regular basis. And I think that it has to be, it's essential because not every parent has the resources or the time, or the knowledge to even know what is required, what is happening. So it does fall on us.
Thank you, Kelly. The next question is from Teo. And so Teo's encouraged by a lot of the shifts and changes happening in Denver public schools, but also concerned that that it's going to be applied inequitably because some of these changes may be optional for charter schools, for innovation schools. And just to piggyback on this comment, Denver has a big history of school autonomy, that schools can make decisions about curriculum on their own. And so I was wondering, Dr. Hill or Meredith, if you could address this issue of how do you ensure consistency with these various changes happening when there is also school autonomy, and is this going to end up being inequitable?
I'm happy to start with that. Thank you for the question. I think, like Ann, to your point, we are a district of autonomy, which means that we will not be saying every school has to use this one resource. But what does exist is that every school must be using a resource K2 that meets the science of reading requirements that have been put out by Colorado State Department of Education. And so any school that is not currently using such a thing will have to submit in the upcoming flexibilities round what they will be using, and it will be reviewed to assure that it's meeting, that it's on Colorado State Department's list of approved curricula, so that we can make sure that every child in K2 is sitting in a classroom with an educator that has a resource in hand that meets the requirements to teach them to read.
Thank you, Meredith. And I echo that in special education. So definitely we're looking at making sure that all of our schools, right, are in compliance with CGE and that they have very strong intervention programs that are approved. And I'd appreciate it. I know Wendy's out there, my colleague, and so she can put in the 2020 CGE advisory list. Those are all the curriculums that have been approved already. So it starts with what would happen or those curriculums in general education, and then a supplementary, and then in special education, we look at the intervention curriculums. And so you can actually, as a parent, and I've actually done this, you can actually go into a school and ask, right, what are they using? What curriculum are you using? And you can go online and, and here it is right here. We have it in the chat. And you can see, is the curriculum that my school has chosen, right? Is it aligned, and is it on the list? Has it been approved? So I think that's also in some ways, Priscilla, like empowering it for parents too. Yep.
And if I could add one more thing, I think that there's like the adoption of curriculum, but there's also a place where like all teachers in Denver Public Schools have been going through, well, all teachers K-3 have been going through the Colorado State Department of Education training. And there's like a movement happening because people realize now that like, if I teach in this way, it will be different for children. If I understand what like that kids need to hear the sounds before we're really worried about the letter sounds, that children will learn to read differently, and more children will be learning to read. And so it's about a curriculum adoption, but it's also about like empowering the teacher with the right information so that they're creating the right experience for all of the children in the classroom. And so I think I'd be remiss if we made this just about like putting a textbook in somebody's hand, because this is really about the power of the educator. And Priscilla, I think you've spoken to this so much, like really tuning in to what each kiddo needs and being able to take it from there and build their knowledge based off of where they are. So it's about curriculum, but it's also about the knowledge that teachers are gaining to be wonderful for children.
I couldn't agree more, Meredith. You can't teach what you don't know. So definitely empowering our teachers is incredibly important, as well as empowering our families, for sure.
Thank you both. We're just about at 7 o'clock, so I'm going to wrap it up here in 1 minute. But we've gotten a couple questions, Meredith, about where core knowledge language arts is being piloted, and also where the Spanish version of that program is being piloted. I wondered if you could address that.
That will be one I have to follow up on, you all. I don't know it off the top of my head, but I'm happy to follow up and let you know that information.
Great. Okay. And we will follow up with our audience members. Thank you all panelists for adding so much to this conversation. We appreciate it. I am now going to turn this over to Ned Kalange from the Colorado Trust to wrap us up. Thank you again.
Thank you, Ann. I'm so humbled to be in the presence of so many dedicated experts. And I've really enjoyed the dialogue this evening. The Colorado Trust is a foundation in Colorado that's dedicated to advancing health equity for all Coloradans throughout the state. And what we mean by that is trying to address those things that we know lead to health and lead to a longer and healthier and more productive life. And as you might have guessed, education is one of the core social determinants of health, as important as things like income and affordable housing, transportation, having a job. And so we're really interested in the area of education. The Colorado Trust does most of its work in the metro area through community organizing and working with people like the Montbello Power Advocates. And Adolfo Alcelar, who's on the call with us, is our community organizer who works with that team. And I think brought us here tonight to help participate with this important webinar. So I appreciate the members of the Power Advocates. And of course, I always appreciate Adolfo's work. He's been great. I wanted to reflect a little bit on what I've heard and maybe see if I could add some closing knowledge. I want to talk about education first as a social determinant of health. And I know we've been talking really about K through third grade, but I want you to think about K through third grade as the building block for success in K through 12 education. And the reason that's important is because if we had to pick one measure that was associated with how long you will live in the United States, what your life expectancy is, one single measure that has more value than anything else we could talk about, it's whether you graduate from high school. It's a remarkable impact. And so K through third grade and reading is essential to that landmark. And if we can make that landmark, we can provide our children with a trajectory and a horizon that is bright and possible. And I don't want to take anything away from college. It's an education that will translate to other things in a person's life, but this is core. And so when we talk about this, we're talking about people's health, children's health, and their life expectancy. Just a couple of things about assessment. I really appreciate all I've heard, and Priscilla, I love the way you put it. There is no more important way of assessing how your child is doing than the parents. You know your child, how you interact with them, how you have discussions with them around meals, around playtime, on the weekends. You are the person who knows how your child is progressing. I do want to point out a resource that, of course, since I'm a doctor, I'll have to talk about, which is your pediatric care provider. And making sure you have your regular assessments, because language development and progression is part of what your healthcare provider provides for you. And if you have questions, I'd really recommend you talk to them as well. But it doesn't take away from the most important person, which is the parent. One of the things that we didn't talk a lot about is the cycle of not doing well. And so one of the reasons K through 3 is so important is our children learn from their environment and from their peers. And if they're having trouble with reading and trouble with knowledge acquisition, as Sonia was talking about, there's a stigma that travels with your child. That's the stigma of not doing well. And so interrupting that cycle and changing it is key to that trajectory of future success. I'm going to end with just first by saying I really appreciate the people who've come here from Denver Public Schools. Your expertise, your commitment is palpable. I know you're dedicated to the success of the children across the city. And I'm going to talk to the other folks on the call about pushing and about advocacy and about agitation and organizing. You need to push. You need to get engaged with your schools. You need to get engaged with your school principal. If you need help with interpretation with your school principal, think about where you can get that and how you can show up with your whole self and your authentic self. I listened to Kelly, who's just amazing to me. And I say, if we had, I don't know, 100 Kellys to apply, we would start to make some real progress in changing the system and moving forward, because Kelly, you're one person. And I could really tell and I could feel how you wish you could do more, and how you know if you could do more, the children would do better. Parents need to know that you pay taxes to pay for the schools, and the schools are responsible for you to make sure your children succeed. And you need to take advantage of that, and you can't step back, and you can't be meek. You have to be forward, and you have to push, and you have to get engaged. I am inspired with what I know you can do. I'm inspired with the knowledge that you all have. I really like what Sonia said about reading and knowledge acquisition. Think about what you know and what you read, and how you could help your child have that same knowledge acquisition, to have a trajectory in life that is good and better, and keep moving ahead, because I know you can do it, and never stop pushing. I am so thankful for the opportunity to hear you all talk. And all, I'm so pleased with the group you put together to talk about this evening. I want folks to know that there's a recording of this conversation and the resources that everyone has named that will be available to you all tomorrow. I also want to say that, and you know I would say this, there's going to be a pop-up survey that will pop up when you exit the event. And I want to encourage you to complete that, because it helps Chalkbeat, it helps all of us, it helps Montbello Power Advocates design better events and better discussions. And with that, I want to thank you all for coming and your participation tonight.